Welcome to the StorySpire podcast. I'm Mary R. Snyder. I am your host and storytelling strategist. I'm here with expert advice, actionable tips, and frameworks to create the stories that will inspire hearts and minds. Because stories change the world. Let's get into it. Let's talk about authenticity, vulnerability, and storytelling. Now, before you think, no, Mary, I'm not doing that. I'm not talking about oversharing. I'm not talking about people we see either in video or read on social media and you think, I don't think I'd have said that. That's a little bit too much information. We all know, we all have run across those posts or maybe even know those people. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being vulnerable, showcasing that you're far from perfect. It can be terrifying. I get it. I've walked it. I know it. And I'm going to tell you the honest truth. This is one of the hardest things that I do as a storyteller. It's really hard for me to be vulnerable because I want to look like I have it all together. Guess what? I don't. And guess what? Neither do you. Another guess what is your audience does not want you to be perfect. They want to know you struggle. They want to see the real you. This was years ago. And I was on a stage that I was ill-equipped to handle. There were thousands of people in the room, and I was fairly new in the whole speaking world. I wasn't prepared because you see, I'm very much an improv speaker, or I used to be. I would wing it. And I stepped on that stage and I was terrified. I started speaking from this place of very much had it all together and I knew everything and I was really on it until I wasn't. You see, I had these notes and I had laid them across because did I mention I wasn't prepared? I had written out what I was going to talk about. I had written out my message. I had all those pages laid out. They looked perfect. I had them lined up. And I jostled what was really just a music stand, not a podium, with my elbow, and those pages slipped off. They fell to the ground. I knew in that moment I had one of two things I could do. I could scramble to pick them up and try to put them back in order. And I don't really remember if they were numbered, but knowing me, they probably weren't. I stopped. I just looked at the audience. I said, I'm going to be honest with you. I am terrified to stand in front of you because every single one of you out there is probably much more equipped to share what I'm sharing today than I am. I'm a mess. I've felt that entire audience lean forward. I continued because you see, I was talking about a place that I had not arrived to. I was sharing a story about what it was like to be a business owner, what it was like to run this nonprofit that I was running and how we were doing. And it was so wonderful, but it wasn't. And I wasn't. And I was a mess and it was a mess. And I finally was honest. And I said, I don't know about you, but this stuff is hard. I started sharing from my heart, and that changed everything. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. It was probably not the best speech I ever gave, and I was not invited back, obviously so. But what it taught me is that it is essential to be honest and also prepared. But honesty and vulnerability matter. I don't want to hear from someone who has it all together. I want to hear from someone that has made the mistakes to get there. I want to hear how you stumbled and you fell. I want to hear that you tried it and it didn't work, and then you tried a different one and that didn't work, and then you tried a third one and maybe that kind of worked. That's what I want to hear. Those are the stories that your audience wants to hear. There's science around this, and you know how I love a little science. So Brene Brown talks about this in her TED Talk on vulnerability, how people don't want to just know your knowledge. They want to connect with you. The willingness To be faulty and fearful makes people lean in. Now, I'm going to read this. I had to write it down. There is a theory called social penetration. I didn't make the name up. It's the name of the theory. Social penetration theory, and it is a theory from Erwin Altman and Dalmas Taylor. The theory is that when you disclose deeper, more personal information with one another, you create deeper connections. When you are standing on a stage telling a story and you're talking about a struggle or a fear, maybe you're talking about, we didn't think this was going to work. We wanted to help people in our neighborhood. We didn't think anyone would ever join us in this effort. In fact, for the first 2 years, we didn't even get paid. We didn't keep the lights on. They got turned off 3 times. It is being real. It is being honest. It is showing people that you don't have it all together, and that's okay. Because people trust people when they believe that you are being authentic. Trust and connection go together. Trust and connection between the speaker and the audience happens when you share what happened before you reach the success. When you talk about the middle of the journey, the messy part. And whether you're a speaker, a fundraiser, a leader, as a leader of a company, maybe you share the stories of the early days when you didn't know if you were going to make it through the week. I'm reminded of a story of FedEx, and it was actually Federal Express back in the day. And the founder, the owner, the one who started the company, Fred Smith, the story is he didn't have enough money to make payroll in those early days. And he went to Vegas and gambled and won and was able to make payroll. Now, what a great story. Got this huge company, so successful. That's how they started. But doesn't that make you lean into FedEx a little bit more? It's the same way with your audience, the same way with your story. So I want to give you a process because I love a process, a framework. So let's start with identify a real challenge. I want to say that again. Identify a real challenge or fear around your story. Maybe you were afraid you were never going to amount to anything. Maybe you were afraid that the organization that you were working to start would never take off. Maybe you were like Fred Smith, just gambling it all. I mean, what if he hadn't won in Vegas? What would have happened? Would we have all the package service we have now? Number 2, I want you to talk about the messy middle. What was the middle like? How was it messy? When I told you the story of me standing on that stage in front of thousands of people and everything blew off and all those papers scattered to the ground. That was my messy middle, and it was literally messy. And I actually have a lot of those to tell you. But what's your messy middle? Where did it get uncomfortable? As a faith-based speaker, was there a season where you were just like, where are you, God? I don't hear you. I don't think my prayers are getting there. Wow, the vulnerability of that. I've been there. As a woman of faith, I have walked that story. I have said those words. I've also been angry at God, and I've railed against it. How unfair it was. I stood in front of an audience and said that. And I was terrified. But as you see, I'm supposed to have it all together. But I don't. And that's okay. We've identified a challenge or a fear. We've walked through the messy middle. Now let's talk about a lesson you learned. Not just the success you had, but a lesson you learned. Now, for my nonprofit storytellers, my nonprofit leaders, I want you to think about this. What is a story you can tell? A story about how maybe you didn't reach your goal. Maybe you're a work in progress. I want you to share a lesson, share an insight on what you learned through this process. What did you learn from this challenge or this fear? What did you learn from the messy middle? Now let's recap our three things. We've identified our challenge or our fear. We have talked through the messy middle. Now we're sharing a lesson or an insight, not just success. What did you learn in this process? How did you walk this out? And what will you give them to take away? I literally was on a stage and I talked about how I didn't have it all together and I didn't know what I was doing. And I will tell you, when I stepped off that stage, I had so many of my fellow directors, I was a director at the time, talk to me about how they felt so seen. They felt so encouraged because I was so honest. So what is it you can share? What is your story? Maybe you're a speaker who you always talk about how you know just how to do this thing. Maybe you need to get a little more honest and talk about how you trip and fall. Maybe you're a nonprofit fundraiser and you need to get honest about the struggles. Maybe you've told one story about one child in need and you've asked them for donations. And I want you to be honest and be real. And let them know this isn't easy for you. You know, standing up here and talking about money isn't easy for me. I wish I never had to do it again. But it's a reality of what I do because I believe so strongly in the work that I do. You see, I'm being honest and I'm being vulnerable. And I'm also not talking about just success. I'm talking about what I'm learning. But I've learned that if I stand up here, if I share my story, then people like you get to join in the work we do. As a speaker, I've learned when I stand up here and I'm honest about how sometimes I felt like God wasn't there. You don't feel alone and that we're in this together. And what I do know is God is there. But I have walked that journey with you. I want to challenge you. The next time you're creating your story, next time you're creating a speech, a message, maybe you're delivering it to your team, I want you to really push and find that fear. I'm going to tell you what my fear was in creating this. Is I want you to see me as someone who has it all together. Guess what? I don't. I am 25 years into storytelling, and I often forget to tell my story in spots like this. When I'm teaching and leading, I often forget that I need to tell stories to you. I was recently working on a new series of emails to send out to people like you who subscribe to my email list. And I realized I had written 4 emails. That's an investment of time for me. I'm a natural speaker. Writing is not as easy for me. And not a one of them had a story about me in it. I'm a storyteller, and yet I forget to tell you the stories. So you see, I hope my vulnerability shows you that I care about what we're doing here. This matters to me. You showing up here to watch me or listen to me, thank you. Because I want us to be better storytellers. I want us to deliver stories that inspire hearts and minds. And I want you to create stories that will change the world because I know you can. I hope you have an incredible day. And I want to remind you that I would love to come to your business, your group, or just work with you about how stories can change the world. You have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.